Today on CityCast Boise. With a new location, fresh parade route, and noticeably fewer corporate sponsors, Boise Pride is going to look a little different this year. We're unpacking the challenges, the traditions, and why Pride Festival matters so much in 2025. It's Wednesday, September 3rd. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me is Donald Williamson, the Executive Director of Boise Pride. Thanks so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
If I asked you to describe what this year's Pride is all about in one word or phrase, what would you say?
If I had to get it down to just one phrase, I would go with what our theme is this year, which is our pride and our power. With all the attacks that we've seen on this community, not just in Idaho, but across the country, the last 5-6+ years, and them ramping up, especially this year with the acceleration of that we've seen this year. It just seems really fitting. I love that it came from the community, and I really hope people kind of take stock in that, kind of getting behind that, this community is still here and we're not going anywhere.
And this year, Pride is going to look a little different. There's a couple reasons why, but maybe the biggest is that Boise Pride is moving to a new location. It's going to be in Ann Morrison Park. And I wanted to highlight that at the top of the show because I'm so worried somebody's just going to show up to Cecil Andrus Park all decked out in their sparkles and their gear and be like, where is Pride?
Yes.
Donald, what went into the decision to move Boise Pride to a new space?
There were a lot of things that went into that decision, and it wasn't something that just happened, overnight. It's a conversation that's been going on internally for several years now, just because of the festival's growth. And Cecil Andrus only has so much real estate, and it's getting harder and harder to accommodate the growing number of vendors and corporate sponsors and attendees that show up. I remember my first year with the organization, I think their previous record for booths was around 90, 92, and around 30 to 40 parade entries on average. And last year we had about 165 booths and 102 parade entries. So that's incredible growth. Ann Morrison gives us a lot more room to spread out and be more comfortable, not just this year, but in future years as we continue to hopefully see growth.
And how do you hope the new location will improve the experience for the community? Of course, there'll be more space, but were there other factors that might improve the Pride experience?
Yeah, it's, as with any decision, there's always pros and cons. And so you got to kind of weigh what those all are. And so for us, some of the pros, obviously the more space, I think one of the immediate benefits we'll see is having that room to spread out. There will be a greater distance between the main stage area and a lot of the vendors. Some of the ones that are placed a little closer to it won't have the same impact as ones where maybe the conversations with, somebody offering, mental health resources for LGBTQ folks where maybe they need a little bit more conversation as to hey, what's your swag that you have this weekend? And, where do you work? And then give me your flyer and I'll move on my way. Because we did hear that from some vendors and even some attendees last year where it was just really difficult to have conversations because the music was so loud on the main stage. And so that will hopefully help with that. And I do think people will appreciate that extra space too, because it was getting crowded down at Cecil and getting to be a really tight fit.
Yeah, no, even from last year, it was a fantastic Pride, but it did almost feel like shoulder to shoulder sometimes trying to navigate those crowds.
Yeah, which is great because you look out in the crowd and you see whoa, and it's, the one fear I have is this year is, you take 4,000 or 5,000 people that want to be up in front of the stage and you put that in the layout we had last year at Cecil Andrus Park with all the vendors, and that looks packed. And you take that exact same amount of people and put them in front of the stage at Ann Morrison where it can spread out, it might look like it's dead. And it's no, it's still the same amount of people. We just have a lot more room to move now. And there will be more room in front of the stage as well for people to spread out a little bit and not be so packed in like sardines as well, too.
Another difference that I wanted to bring up is I saw on the Boise Pride Instagram, and then also KTVB reported that corporate donations for Boise Pride are down this year. How much of a drop did you see from last year?
My best guess is we're probably going to end up around $200,000 shy of what we have raised the last several years on average, which is pretty significant.
Yeah, no, that's quite a bit of money. And with donations down, I guess that significantly, how has that shaped the way that you've planned Pride? What parts of Pride have you had to adjust?
All of it. We've made adjustments, everywhere we can, while still feeling at the same time we can still put on a festival that our community is used to having. We've downsized the stage a bit. That saves quite a bit of money. We cut Friday night from the festival this year, knowing that our community is kind of used to having Friday night as kind of like the kickoff party and fireworks, knowing they're going to want to have something to do Friday, and still wanting to help bring that community downtown to the downtown businesses. We have a separate event, that we've added, but we did cut Friday from the festival to cut those hard costs. And then stepping up and really utilizing volunteer manpower in areas that, in more areas that we haven't before, where we use maybe paid labor, and we made some agreements with some of our vendors. Hey, can we supplement, some volunteer manpower here to help offset some of these costs? And so it's every little area where we can try to pinch a penny, save a penny, and still put out a good product.
And do you think that this decision different corporations have made to not sponsor Pride this year, do you see that as part of a bigger cultural shift, or is it just a business decision? Like, is this about economics, or is it more about politics?
All of the above. There are some sponsors that we've had in the past that won't be there this year, that, never responded to our, communications that I sent out like I usually do at the beginning of each year. So it's hard to say what their reasonings are, but I can make my best assumptions, especially knowing the industries that those businesses are involved in and knowing how they are directly being impacted by this current administration, and the levers that it's trying to hold over some of these businesses to play ball. There are some who are coming back, or aren't coming back, that have told me their reasons why they can't be back this year and hope it changes next year. And they're not coming out on the table and saying it, but I, again, can kind of put two and two together. And then there's a number of sponsors who are back, and I expect will always be back regardless of climate, but their investment is lowered because of economic reasons. I think there was a number of them that at the end of last year, once this new administration was elected, went back to their year-end budgets planning for this year and made adjustments to their marketing budgets and community outreach budgets and grants and other things. And so it doesn't take many of those businesses to budget cut 5,000 here, 3,000 there, 10,000 here, and that adds up really quick for an organization like ours. When San Francisco Pride made the big news early in the year about Anheuser-Busch pulling out their $300,000, that's a huge hit for that one sponsor. That's not something that Boise Pride has ever had access to. We haven't had national Anheuser-Busch money. We haven't had, big corporate national dollars. It's always been local businesses, local branches of that. And so a couple of sponsors with, that adds up to $20,000 total, that can have an impact that's almost as big as that $300,000 on San Francisco, because we're a smaller community here.
And since you made that announcement on Instagram, since it's made the news, have you noticed that these smaller local businesses are stepping up to show support in new ways or different ways, or other groups donated to Boise Pride?
Yeah, we've seen that throughout this, our fundraising season leading up to the festival. Even before that announcement, there's a lot of, just because of the sentiment nationally with Pride festivals, and the fact that ours is later in the year, there was kind of growing sentiment within the small business community, within some even new corporate sponsors that have never been involved with us before that have come on board, and just general word of mouth within the community about really wanting to step up and be there and show out for the community this year. But sadly, with small businesses, there's a lot of them that are like, we support you and we want to help, but we don't have the funding because of tariffs having very real economic impacts on their bottom line. And, their priority is to keep their business above, floating and keeping their staff paid. And so it has a bigger impact on a small business that donates, $500 to an organization versus a corporation that's, multi-billion dollar annually and donates 20,000 plus and ends up getting a write-off at the end of the year. And so we have a lot of small businesses that like, we can't support financially, but we want to help in this way. Here's services that we can offer. And so we've been creative with a lot of sponsors this year. And if there's a sponsor that it's what they can do in kind is something that helps to offset a hard cost for us at the festival, then by all means, because it's the same thing as writing a check for that. So there is a lot of support out there, but it is different this year. It's harder for them, for sure.
We've seen a rise in both anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and laws locally and nationally since last Pride. How is that shaping Pride this year?
As far as like the rhetoric and everything goes, that's something that we've seen since my first year in the organization. And frankly, when we see that rhetoric start to escalate, it just makes us want to put the festival on more. It just makes us want to do it harder, I guess, because that's why we need events like this to show this community, like, you have support, you have a community, you're not alone, especially in a state like Idaho, where it can feel probably pretty easily to feel alone sometimes. And then to also show the rest of the people that, this community isn't going anywhere. Do we sometimes take a little bit stronger look at security and things like that to make sure it's a safe event? Absolutely. I don't think this community ever gets the luxury, regardless of our political climate, of not taking security as a top concern to make sure that people have safe events. Because sadly, we're in a day and age where there are still people in this community that don't feel safe even coming out to friends and family, much less going out publicly and expressing themselves. So, maybe we just make sure we cross our T's and dot our I's a little more carefully, but it doesn't make us shy away from wanting to do this.
Yeah, it sounds like you've really embraced Newton's third law of motion. The more they push, the more you're just going to pride harder.
Pretty much. Yep.
Yeah, equal and opposite reaction.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know that at the end of the day, I hate bullies, and I know at the end of the day, it usually just takes somebody who's willing to step up in front of them and just kind of stand there and not back down for them to finally like quiet down a bit. So that's kind of my role.
Yeah. And can I ask, for as specific as you feel comfortable sharing, how is Boise Pride working to balance safety for attendees when we've discussed, some people in this area don't even feel safe coming out to people around them, while also making sure that Pride is feeling welcoming and inclusive?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. I've had meetings in the last, few years with different community leaders and members of the community for, other events not related to Pride. They just, wanted our input. And I've run into, some LGBTQ people on those panels who, I remember one young woman specifically who just said, I've still never been to Boise Pride. And when I talked to her about it candidly, like, why? She was like, I don't know. I'm always worried about safety. And when I just asked her point blank, like, what could we do as an org to address to make you feel like it would be safe? And she's like, I don't know. So that's always a struggle. And that's always something that we try to tackle every year and see if there's anything that we're missing to try and make it feel more safe for that part of the community. So I'm always open to ideas there. But without giving out specific security stuff, we're working with a lot of the same partners that we've worked with since my first year in the org. When we had a lot of public backlash and a story that went global, and security was like a whole thing. So then it absolutely became my number one agenda item every year when we start planning the festival. And so we have a good working relationship with Boise Police. MAV Security will be back again this year. Actually, the move to Ann Morrison as we start planning the layout of the new festival map this year, I think just that venue in and of itself lends it to be a little safer as well, because it's not. Cecil Landris is a great venue, but it's right downtown and it's pretty exposed. It's pretty open, and Ann Morrison gives us some ability to kind of isolate that more, so that the community just can focus on being with each other while they're there at the festival. So that's I'm really looking forward to having that venue be an added measure.
And Donald, despite all of the challenges and with all of these changes, what are some traditions that are staying the same that people can count on this year?
We're still going to have Hometown Drag Show, because that's always like number one hit. I swear that doesn't matter who we bring in for talent. The Hometown Drag Spectacular will always have the biggest crowd at any one time to watch people on stage. They are a hit with community, and it is great to see that local community get that support, which I love. That's actually become one of my favorite moments throughout the festival as well.
It's that hometown pride. We love it.
Yep, exactly. We'll have a pet show again this year, which is kind of a newer thing that we've added, but it's been so popular that'll be coming back. There'll be hopefully a lot of the same feel, even though there are some differences. It is. I agree with members of the board and members of the community that we've had conversations with. It is bittersweet not having the Capitol building as a background anymore. There's something, kind of iconic about having that building, specifically the Idaho legislature, and how it's been attacking this community for so many years now. And having that as a backdrop to this, the original Pride was a protest. And so it just felt like kind of a doubling down on that to this legislature of saying, like, we're not going anywhere. And then lighting the Capitol, those two things being taken away, those do suck, but we will still have the fireworks show this year, because we know the community has come to expect that. And it's a big event that people look forward to every year. That's a tradition that we want to keep. And then, hopefully with this new home moving forward, we can develop some new traditions to add on to that. The board, the organization, and hopefully the community can come up with and have that be something meaningful to eventually kind of replace that Capitol and the lighting.
And what are some new moments that you're excited for, or some new things that people should know about?
Well, aside from being excited about the location and a brand new parade route, which is amazing also, there will be some new stuff this year. I know there is a local tattoo artist who's a member of the community that reached out early in the year. And what we worked out this year is she'll be on site doing a series of flash tattoos during the festival for people that want them. I know that a number of people in the area watched, as I did, on live streaming the Daniel Hamrick's performance at the downtown festival earlier this year. And Daniel,
the hetero awesome failure fest.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah.
And first thing I did on that stream was try to reach out and find out who that was. And so Daniel Hamrick and his band will actually be performing on Saturday at the festival. And then, like I mentioned earlier, with cutting Friday night at the festival, we have a new event this year, a ticketed event that we're doing with at Tree Fort that will be a replacement for that. And that will be kind of a kickoff to the Pride Festival weekend. That's going to have the Knox and Dragonette and Aquaria, which I'm really excited to see that. I'll probably be exhausted, and that will wear me out for the rest of the weekend. But I am looking forward to that.
Worth it.
Yes.
Well, Donald, what's a hidden gem at Pride this year that you think people will miss if they don't know to look for it?
For me, my first year at the festival, coming in early one morning, there was this group of young ones, I'd say, late teens probably. And they got together every morning early before the festival even opened. And they just came into the park and found a piece of grass and pulled up, and they just sat down and shot the shit with each other and was doing their makeup and getting their makeup ready for the day. There was at least two of those kids that I guarantee you had to hide that part of themselves at home or in their daily life. And to see them get together with their friends and just relax and be open and be themselves and not have to worry about looking over the shoulder to see who's watching them do their makeup. And to know that was going to be able to have this amazing day and an experience with their friends at the festival, just being themselves. That to me is the hidden gem. If you find yourself sitting there for a little bit, kind of taking a breather while you're, eating some food, just people watch. And you'll see what this event means to the community.
I think the theme of this conversation has been that this year's Pride is going to be different. It's got a new park, a new parade route, and some more opposition. But at its heart, what do you hope still feels the same for people at Pride?
Community and acceptance. There's times where it just feels like I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. But then the festival opens and you see that community come together and just the joy that everybody is having and not worrying about all the other stuff outside the festival that we typically have to deal with year round, especially during our legislative session. And to have that weekend to just forget it. And it kind of makes it all worth it. And that's what we look forward to every year. And that's why we do it.
Well, Donald, thank you so much. I know you are in the thick of things. Pride is coming up quickly. You are a very, very busy person. So I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and have this conversation with me. And I'm so excited. This is CityCast Boise's first year having a booth. We're going to be in the parade, and we are so excited to be vendors/sponsors at Pride this year.
Yes, and we're excited to have you. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure and tell your friends about the show. We'll be back tomorrow morning to find out why fall might be Idaho's best season. Catch you then.